This Escalade, with an original sticker price of $85,000, came with four-wheel drive, a digital dash, rear screen television with Cadillac branded headphones, and one glaring issue. It was marked as is and graded very poorly, so it sat at the auction for months, where the price continued to drop each week until I scooped it up for over $10,000 off current wholesale values. When I saw it in person for the first time, I was puzzled. How was this thing just kicked to the curb? It looks in really great condition inside and out. The selling dealer, a franchise Cadillac store, listed the reason for it being as is that its radar and parking sensors were inoperable. But what dealer offering their junk at wholesale auction will lose out on a $10,000 profit opportunity over a few $100s in parts and maybe a few hours in labor, which they could easily source in-house? Today, we'll figure out if there's more to the story. And hint, there's always more to these stories, but I always like to start with the photos and description, especially since I bought this car totally sight unseen in Ohio, over 1,000 miles away. Do you see what I see? Remember, the main condition disclosure with this car is that the parking and radar sensors were inoperable. Now, I don't think this is really a common issue on these cars, but where these systems start to get finicky is if there's physical damage to these parts, including the sensors or receivers. This sensor definitely looks off, and if that's our major problem, then I just scored huge. Now, the other strange thing is that this Escalade, with zero mechanical faults, was graded a 2.0 out of 5, which is really low. Generally, this sort of rating is reserved for a junk car in really poor cosmetic condition, like my 260,000-mile C6 Corvette, or something mechanically total, like every single Range Rover with over 30,000 miles. To put things in perspective, this Viper truck I just picked up from the same auction was a 2.6, and it wasn't even marked as is. It's got a chunk out of the front bumper, a busted ground wire that makes it near impossible to start, several different fluid leaks, it's missing trim pieces, and just look what happens when you take a little bit of leather honey leather cleaner mixed with some water to its steering wheel. So it's obvious that these auction ratings don't provide a consistent nor reliable result, unlike leather honey, which every time I've used it leaves my leather feeling clean and supple. Now, the first time I used leather honey, I noticed a huge difference in the way it works compared to some other products I've tried in the past. First off, when you wipe it on the seat, it actually stays put and it doesn't evaporate into thin air after just a few seconds, because leather honey was designed to sink deep into each fiber in your leather surface, conditioning them so they last for months on end. One application can last up to 6 months. And in the hard to reach area like the pleats and my Ferrari seats, I like to apply it by hand because, first of all, it feels amazing and leaves your hands feeling amazing after you're done using it, and it really does make a huge difference in how the seats feel afterward. They're just so soft and clean. You gotta check out Leather Honey's Leather Care Kit down at the links in the description box. Make sure during checkout you use code SAMCRACK20. That's gonna get you 20% off your very own leather care kit, and it even works on Amazon. Again, those links are down in the description box, and make sure you use code SAMCRACK20 at checkout. Immediately after getting the Escalade off the delivery truck, I noticed the front end suspension felt really wonky. At any speed it was pulling in either direction, and the steering wheel shook a bit. Now, combine a suspension issue with an inoperable radar sensor, and it's pretty clear that this car was in an accident, even though there are no reported accidents on its history report. And I'm not too worried about all this as long as there's no massive frame damage. Now, besides the steering wheel, you can see these warning messages popping up on the dashboard, warning us about a seatbelt tightening system, which also likely has to do with an accident, and also the driver aids, which includes our radar system. Normally, you should be able to clear these messages by hitting the steering wheel buttons, but they're completely dead too. These should light up, but as you can see, they're not even on. Like I said earlier, when it comes to these as-is auction cars, there's always more to the story. Overall, from the outside, everything's pretty good, but the front bumper, there's a little bit of funny business going on here. If you get really close, you could see that it was resprayed. It's a pretty good job, but here is your dead giveaway right here. You see that little bit of overspray on the plastic trim. This wasn't just resprayed, it was resprayed on the car. So this is one of the first things I noticed in the auction photos. See that right there? That parking sensor is completely loose. That'll definitely cause your driver assist system to go crazy. This one also looks a little funny, but it is much more firmly in place, so I don't suspect there's an issue with that one. It's got to be with this one. Another thing that was pretty clear in the auction photos is right here. There's no way an Escalade would come with just this radiator support hanging out here. There's definitely a plastic trim piece that covers all the front end here, covers up these wires, and it just came missing. So somebody's been in this front end, and maybe it was just damaged to the point where they pulled it off the car and tossed it. We get a little closer here, can definitely see some cracks in the radiator support trim here. Another crack there and another here. Check this out. There's a headlight bracket that has been cracked off here. If you compare it with the passenger side, You can see where it would normally be. This is a very, very common thing to happen when cars are in fender benders. These things crack off all the time, but it is also a very common attribute of used headlights that you buy like on eBay. When you're shopping these expensive LED headlights, you'll notice that the cheaper ones always have brackets missing. So what's not to say that this Escalade was completely bashed in the front and they just went and grabbed a cheap used headlight? It's possible, but a lot of the things that I like to see, like the inside paint here on the fender, the general paint condition of the fender, this all looks factory. It looks fresh and in really nice condition. Also, these little braces and things like that that have a little bit of corrosion on them. If this was all recently replaced, well, you would know because it would look all brand new. And this all has a little bit of wear on it consistent with the mileage of the car. Those parking sensors might help me right about now. Telling you, this lift has changed my life. Now normally we're working on sports cars, so we got everything really low here, but since we're dealing with a big SUV today, well, it comes with these jack pads that whenever you twist them, they actually get taller, so you can get the most amount of height out of this thing. And this specific lift, it's got a 10,000 pound weight capacity, so we can lift big heavy trucks like this Escalade. All right, we've got this thing up in the air. I set my light up and I've already run into a little bit of funny business. Now, told you that the front suspension feels a little wonky, and if you look at all the bushings, everything like that, the ball joints, I didn't see anything split, anything weird, kind of just pulled on everything. The tie rod here, everything feels really steady until you take a look at this guy over here. Let's see if I can get you a good look at this sway bar end link. Notice there's a bit of up and down play in the middle here, but then look, see this guy? See how loose it is? It's not even connected to the car. Now I pulled up what an original one looks like. There's a bushing that goes here and a bushing that also goes right down here. So clearly those have busted off, and we need a whole replacement. Luckily, they're super cheap at only $4 a piece. And this one isn't the only one that's bad. Look at this. Now, will replacing these make the front end feel stable again? Maybe, because at this point, it's like the sway bar isn't even connected to this car. But for $4 a piece, there's no point in guessing. I already ordered these things up. They'll be here in a few days. I'll install them, and we'll get to that when we do. But I don't suspect that the suspension feeling is the big problem in this car. I think it's going to be under here where I spotted a hanging connector and a module that, well, it's just zip tied in place, and also the connector doesn't seem to be firmly inserted. Let's see if we can get that back. Obviously, this is not a factory zip tie, and that's not where this module belongs. So I went and grabbed this part number. I referenced it on Google, and it said that this is a front parking sensor receiver or a radar sensor receiver. I forget exactly, but it works in line with the sensors. You see the one there? That's the back of the one that we suspect had an issue in the auction photos. And check this out. If I get a little closer and move it just a little bit, the bracket in which it sits in the car is literally falling off. Now, that should be able to be repaired with just a little bit of epoxy. There's not a lot of room here though, because we've got the front crash support right in the way. Worst case scenario, we'll have to pull this bumper off. So far we're down 2 sway bar links and a little bit of epoxy, but I wondered, where in the heck is this module supposed to sit? Obviously there's 2 holes right here. I thought maybe something mounted in there. I came over to this side, saw that this connector is identical to this connector, and online there's a left and a right hand side of these modules. And so I thought, okay, well, we lost that module in whatever sort of crash or fender bender this car had. I started looking up replacement parts, and that module is a few $100 at least used. So before I went and ordered one up, I wanted to make sure it wasn't hiding somewhere in all this mess of everything. So I hopped on eBay. I looked for a Escalade front bumper assembly, and what do you know? There's one for sale for several $1,000s. You see that right there? The module is held in by a little cage in the front bumper. Now, it's completely missing on this side, but it should be sitting right about there. You see where these little dots are right here? That's where the bracket was originally sitting, and that cage busted off this side of the bumper, why somebody went and just zip tied it here. Our module is right there. It just is not plugged in, and the connector is split. What I want to know, since we clipped this one in place, now I want to see if if I can fit my hand up here behind the crash bar and get this one to snug itself in, could that potentially bring our radar sensors back online? Look at the amount of movement in this bumper. It's clearly not bolted in all the way. The wheel liners here are all loose. The good news is, though, is all the brackets on both sides are all there. And usually in these severe accidents, the brackets where the wheel liners go in and the wheel liners themselves, if they're made out of plastic, just get destroyed. So far, we're going to go with the theory that this car was just in a really minor fender bender and it messed a few little things up here. I'm thrilled so far. It just doesn't make any sense that nobody would take about 10 minutes to look into what we're doing right now. Well, this module is completely flipped around. That's why I can't see where the connector goes in. It's the wrong way. Let's see if I can adjust this. Somebody had to have tried all this, right? Look, there's the module right there. We're gonna look at that. We're gonna get all the water out of it. Oh, do you hear this? That thing's toast, right? Where's it coming out of? Looks like it's probably coming out of here. Now what happened is this was sitting in the bumper like this, and it was unplugged. So I'm imagining as it rained, the water collected in here and found its way into the module. I think it should be sitting more like this because the bracket it was in was more shaped like this. So anyway, this is a sealed unit. I don't see any screws or any access places anywhere. Let's try and pry this open just for the fun of it because, well, we know we're gonna have to replace it. Now that I've got it opened up, look. Oh, actually doesn't look that bad. Now this is really reminiscent of what recently happened with the Lemon Lincoln. I showed you guys how one wheel speed sensor failed and it took down all the different safety systems in the car. All of the different sensors and modules communicate, and when one goes down, well, it leaves the electronics in the car compromised. But if this is really the major problem in this car, why it was marked as is, this is a huge win. And obviously I'm going to replace this. I looked online, a used one runs only about 150 bucks. So it's going to be a cheap enough fix too, but let's have some fun with this first. Here we go. All I've got is a old toothbrush and a little bit of rubbing alcohol. I'm just going to put it specifically in that area by the connector because it looks like there's a little bit of corrosion there. I'm just going to gently brush it. You've probably seen this done on a cell phone or maybe a laptop, but people try this on car modules, especially those dealers that like to buy flood cars. They always try and repair the modules first. Again, I want this car to work. I really want to use this car and have it as a long-term Lemon Lincoln replacement, but it'll be wild if this thing still works after being waterlogged. You can still see this module's got a little bit of the rubbing alcohol on it. This was no super deep clean. We're not going to leave it in a bag of rice overnight. What we're going to do is something quick and dirty. Let's just plug it back into the car, fire it up, and see if it changes those messages on the dashboard. And all we need to do is push the pins in here. It should be pretty snug, and then we'll go ahead and tuck it right here so it doesn't fly out. What are you guys thinking? Yes, no, maybe? Foot on the brake. Let's hit the push to start button. Automatic collision prep reduce, auto seatbelt tightening unavailable. I do think that's different. Didn't it say something about the front sensors or sensors being deactivated? Look, this is different too. Beforehand, there was no light on the parking sensor button here on the dash. It says service driver assist system. Let's look here. I think that did fix the problem. Let's see what happens. This was permanently shut off. You couldn't even actuate this button. Look, let's see. We touch it, look, it went off, and now it says rear auto brake off. I'm gonna hit this button again. Let's see if we can see what it says. Rear auto brake on, park assist on. And then I'm gonna hit the button again. Rear auto brake off, park assist off. Look at that, we just fixed whatever that issue was by simply plugging in that module. So I thought this fixed the issue, and the behavior of our switches were definitely different than before. We still had the message on the dashboard to service driver assist. The next least path of resistance here is to break out the diagnostic scanner. It's possible that the codes are set and the errors won't go away until we clear them. I looked through all the codes and many pertain to what we were working on. And it's always good practice to clear all your codes. This car came from the auction. It sat for God knows how long, so maybe the battery died or something like that. But just because I want to know exactly what's going on and I want to see what codes were thrown, it's important to go through all these. So the first one for the ECM, it says lost communication with cruise control. I imagine that would have to do with the fact that our safety systems were offline because this has radar cruise. We go to transfer case control. Well, this one's strange. Transfer case clutch had a high temperature. That is not great. Maybe someone at the auction was trying out the four-wheel launch system in it. All right, inflatable restraint system. Lost communication with instrument panel cluster module. These are the ones we're interested in here. Seatbelt retractor module. Electronic control hardware. And then the last system here has 10 different codes in it, so we definitely want to check that out. Lost communication with right front short-range radar sensor. Of course, you did. Now, there were a bunch of codes here, and they went way past those front sensors and receivers. Either way, I cleared everything, started the car back up, and a lot of these same errors came right back. The next easy thing to check here is the fuses. I checked all the fuses pertaining to any of the driver assist systems and the one for the steering wheel controls, and they were all good. All right, now we're running out of easy things at this point, and this is why you can get a steep discount on an as-is car. They'll always mention the easiest thing that needs fixing in the listing and always fail to mention any of the real difficult problems. And speaking of difficult, if you remember the BMW X6M, one waterlog module brought down our entire CAN bus network. That's the network that all the car's electrical systems communicate with, and the car acted real funny, throwing all sorts of warning lights. I unplugged both modules, cleared the codes, powered it up, and remembered this isn't a BMW. We're dealing with something really strange here, and while I thought since we found that waterlog module we had our issues nailed down, I was very wrong. I put the car back up in the air, looked all around the chassis for major frame damage or ground wire issues, and besides a bit of surface rust everywhere, I didn't see anything really out of the ordinary. If I would have bought one of these cars without any issues, it would have cost me around 40 grand. This one cost 28, so I have a few $1,000 budget to fix things here, but I feel like we're in the first inning of a very long baseball game, and I'm no fan of baseball, but if you are and want to follow along the diagnosis and repair process in figuring out this Cadillac, make sure you're subscribed to my channel by hitting that button below. If you think we should just stop right here before we lose a lot of money, go ahead and hit the like button, and make sure you drop a comment if you have any idea what might be going on here. I'll be back with an update shortly, and I want to thank each and every one of you for watching today. I'll catch you very soon.